Fairies. They are beautiful and elegant creatures from the fantasy world. They conjure up images of nature in its most base, magical state. They are elegant, but sometimes tricksters that can beguile the human mind. Sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're foes. But this particular fairy, this fairy-type Blastoise, is not elegant. This Blastoise is a clown. So today I'm going to be coloring this ridiculous unhinged character. I had a lot of fun drawing it, but today I want to talk about color specifically. We're going to talk about color theory, shadows and highlights, what different kinds of rendering techniques you can use, the difference between form shadows, cast shadows, bounce lights, speculars, regular highlights, how to differentiate different materials, and how to check the value to make sure that you have nice contrast in your piece at the end. Kind of a quick shotgun of all of my basic color theory knowledge that I think about while I draw. And this time I'm actually recording as I draw, or as I work on the coloring, so that everybody can see exactly what I do, and I don't have to record and try to time it with what I'm working on. So I'm going to make a new layer. I suppose I should talk about my layers. If you see them over at the side, all labeled layer 55, layer 42, layer 66. I'm just going to embrace the chaos for now. We're drawing a clown Blastoise, so I'm not going to worry about naming the layers. You can do that if you need to on your own. I typically don't, unless I'm sharing it with someone else. So first things first, we have regular Blastoise colors here. I figured we should just start from scratch, a nice color scheme that's already been tried and true, tested, that people already like. But I am going to be going through here and working at ×1 speed for once. And probably making tiny little corrections to the line work like I'm doing right now. And I'm going to be coloring this in a couple of different ways. Well, I'll probably shade it in one way, but we'll take a look at things as we go. This is my first time doing this, bear with me. So before anything, I hope you like my line work. I hope you like my design. I think it's very ridiculous. After the badass Dark Venusaur and the super sleek and cool Ice Charizard that I did previously, I thought the Blastoise fans would hate me. No, I thought the Blastoise fans deserved a zag from left field on this ridiculous fairy-type Blastoise. And it doesn't look that fairy-type right now. It just looks like a clown Blastoise, but the color is going to be very important, and it's going to sell this creature. So first, while we're still kind of in the line work phase, I haven't really done much so far. I wanted to show my brushes. Brushes are a thing that I heard of so much growing up as I got used to digital art. Back when digital art was a lot more, I'd say less reachable to the general audience. There's a word there, I can't think of it. Accessible. Less accessible to a general audience. And back in the early 2000s, I was learning, about what programs to use and what brushes to use and everything. And eventually I've painted, but I'm not a painter. So I find a lot less enthusiasm in having lots of crazy brushes. If you have crazy brushes, feel free to put them anywhere you want. My work is super, cartoony, super simple. And there's always a place for an awesome brush. But I tend to not use anything crazy. I have 5 main brushes that I use. This one is just kind of a flat tip chisel thing. Not really any size or opacity variation on it. It's got this weird chunky effect when you turn, but I kind of like it. It gives it a sketchy look. And if I make it really small, it's really slight there. It's kind of like a shading pencil. It's weird. After that, we have this pencil-esque brush. I may have downloaded this from somewhere. You can make your own super easily. It's just a tip that rotates on every stroke. It's just this weird funky shape that wiggles around. Kind of reminds me of mulch. It's weird. But I like it. I'm probably going to say it's weird a lot, but bear with me. It's just this nice crunchy pencil brush. It's got size on it. It does not have any opacity variation. I'm sure you can edit it to do that. It's super easy to edit brushes and make your own. It's actually a fun process, and it makes you feel a lot more connected to your work. I promise I'm going to talk about color as well. This is the basic Photoshop round brush with size control. Nothing special. Then the same exact thing, but with soft edges and a minimum diameter. That's about 50% probably. And then the last one, I don't use it as much. That's not it. Here we go. This is just a brush without any size control, but with opacity control on the pressure. And so I like sketching with this sometimes. I don't use it that often. It's probably my least used one of the 5. But these 4 brushes are like 99% of my work. I doubt I'll use another brush anytime soon. Sometimes I have a sparkle brush or a bubble brush, some kind of effect, but I kind of just stick to these 4. I don't need anything else for the type of work that I'm doing. And I'm going to go in here and do this because it's bugging. Get a nice little taper. I'm sure I'll fix a million things while I'm coloring. I'm also pausing every so often to take a breath because I get really excited and I'm not used to recording while I draw. I used to stream, but I haven't in a while, and recording is actually new for me, so getting used to it. So, to start with the coloring, the first step, it doesn't have to be, but my first step is picking the colors. You can shade a picture when it's completely white. Like, I can go through here and turn all this off. And you can do the shading on this like it's a white porcelain paintable figurine if you want, and then do the colors afterward if that's more fun for you. If you want to get started on the shading right away, please don't let me stop you. Change whatever part of this process you find comfortable or exciting. But I would pick a color scheme first, just because it helps me solidify what kind of shadows I want to make. Something that is pink, like a pastel pink, will probably have a different color applied to its shadow or highlight than something that is a desaturated matte blue, like the skin on this Blastoise here. So for the first step, I'm just going to go through and pick some colors, and I'll probably do a couple of these. But when I think about fairies, you always got to go with the classic, pastel or neon. And those two things may not mix super well, but I either think about soft pastel fairies in a field, or I think about absolutely unhinged hot pink. And we are going with clowns, so either one of these works. Clowns have just as many variations as fairies do. We're going to start with pink hair, and I might go with a teal or mint green for the skin. And I'm sure if you've looked into colors at all, you've seen stuff like complementary colors, tertiary colors, like there were things like that. Pink and green are opposite each other on the color wheel, so they tend to contrast each other in a nice, pleasing way. This might be a little too blue for me. I am just now understanding the challenge of drawing and talking at the same time. But I actually like that, but it does remind me, Squirtle has a lot more of a light blue hue to its skin. Blastoise, I think, gets a lot darker. So this is kind of looking a little squirtly, but it's more green than Squirtle. I like this. I like the green and pink combination. Teal and pink is nice. The pink's a little desaturated, though. I might bump it up. And it might look different once I shade it. But I like this color scheme. Now, both of those colors are really bright, really light in value. So I might change the actual fleshy tone of it. I'll tint it toward red a little bit. I kind of like that, but it might not be final. I'll try a couple of different things, we'll see. And these things match the hair. The cannons, maybe the cannons are dark because they're going to shoot confetti. So I'll keep them dark for now. We'll come back. And the shell, oh god, I could make this the most ridiculous color imaginable. Some colors are just gonna clash. There's nothing nice about this color with the others. But if we're already going with a warm brown, warm pink in the hair, red nose, the skin, the teal skin on this pass might end up being the one cool color involved. Or I'll make the skin and the metal bits, the light gray around its arms and chest, and the cannons, I might keep those a cool tone and make everything else a warm tone. We'll see how it works. But if I wanted to go with a warm tone, maybe stay in kind of a magenta area. That's actually kind of nice. I actually kind of like that. If I made it darker, I'd probably desaturate it just a little bit so it wasn't like, you know, this vibrant, deep shadow. Maybe not yet. But it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of just messing around and seeing what works. Don't rush this part. Just coming up with a color scheme can be super fun. And the skin, being this teal color, definitely pops on all of these warm tones. So I think I might make the cannons a warm tone as well. Let's see, let's go red, desaturate it almost all the way, make them slightly darker because we're going to lighten them up. They're made of metal, we're going to put some cool highlights on them later. And then these parts around the arms, we're going to colorize. And so for this, I don't know if you can see this second window, I keep doing it without showing it. I'm using just the hue saturation tool. You can hit Control U in Photoshop, I believe, or just open your hue saturation tool in whichever program you're using. And I'm just nudging it around to different colors and hues. I'm sure most drawing programs have a function like this. Sorry, I don't know how to do it in Procreate or Clip Studio Paint, whichever different art program you happen to be using. But I'm going to colorize this, and I think this should be a cool tone rather than warm. I think it fits with the skin enough that it should fit in with the teal. But it's so bright you can barely tell anyway. If I made it pink, would that be any different? I actually like that. I actually like that. I changed my mind. I've 180'd on that very quickly. Are we gonna pull an Ed, Edd n Eddy and make its tongue a goofy color? Goofy colored tongue is always peak. Might be a little too much for now, but could make it a little more saturated though. That's so much. There's so much pink, but this is a fun color scheme, and even maybe to help the red be less abrasive, we nudge it toward pink a little bit. It looks so much better that way. And we'll do that with the eyeball as well. We'll make it a little bit more reddish because it was a little tinted toward the blue side. And then this brown eye can get tilted toward the cool side. Now, brown is orange. Or I should say that brown exists between red and yellow. There can be reddish browns, yellowish browns. When you start talking about greenish browns, you're not talking about brown anymore. You're talking about some other crazy color like taupe or something. Taupe's probably not brown. I'm probably wrong about that. Google it. But a cool brown, if you were to take a color like orange that's as far away from blue as you can get and try to make it cool, you're not, well, with paint, you're adding blue, right? Because that's how paint works. Paint works differently than colors on a computer or a light bulb, light source. That's a tangent that I'll probably get into right after I talk about this, so I'm not too confusing. But if you make a cool brown, you're just desaturating it. And that is the same. I will make a blue mark here to display what I mean. Let's see, blue, and just to make this make more sense, I'll grab purple, and I'll grab a fierce, fiery orange. And this blue I'll actually move over here a little bit, so, oops. This blue I'm actually going to move over here just a little bit. Now, if someone told you to make this purple warmer, well, that's easy. Purple is red and blue mixed together. The purple is going to nudge toward red. It's going to get warmer. This seems cooler. This seems warmer. It's not quite purple anymore. We're getting into pink or magenta, but it's really subtle. You can nudge the purple a little bit in a warmer direction. Or if someone said make it cooler, you nudge it toward blue. It loses some of that heat that we associate with the reddishness. And you push it toward blue a little bit more, staying in an indigo area. Warmness and coolness is definitely a function of color and light that you have to play with when you're coloring something. This video is going to be really long, isn't it? But that isn't as easy to do with other colors. Purple, sure, easy. Green, you can do that with too. You can nudge green toward yellow, makes it feel warm. You can nudge green toward blue, makes it feel cool. Green and magenta, just like the teal and pink, are complementary. They're opposites on the color wheel, so you can do that easily. Those two colors are kind of equally positioned between red and blue on a color wheel, so it's easy to nudge them one way or the other. Orange, on the other hand, you nudge it one way, it turns red. You nudge it the other way, it turns yellow. Those are both warm. You're not affecting its coolness at all by doing this. So, thinking about the fact that orange and blue are opposite each other on the color wheel, making orange red or yellow, it stays warm. It's going to be warm no matter what you do to an orange. Cool orange is desaturating the orange. That's going to make it feel cooler because you are toning down its natural heat, I guess you could say. And that applies the same if red. You could make red cooler by nudging it toward magenta, or you could do it by desaturating it. And a desaturated red is going to feel cooler if you have a drawing or an illustration or design that prioritizes cool colors, but something needs to be red or brown. It makes it feel really cohesive when you nudge that red down in saturation without changing its hue at all. Just because it helps the coolness of the rest of the design shine through. Look how attractive that blue and purple circle look now, how much focus they're taking, versus when the orange is up, it's competing with them. If you need a cool design and you don't want that thing to just not be orange, let's say it's a tree and it has brown bark, you could have a really intense brown on the tree like this, but it's threatening to compete with the cool colors of, let's say, the sky or the water or lilacs, whatever you have in the scene. But if you nudge the saturation of those branches down and make the brown a lot more desaturated, it's still going to read as brown next to those two colors. You can take almost all the saturation out of it. It's kind of looking gray now, but it's everything in moderation. You can take a lot of the saturation out of that, and that feels cool. It makes the blue and the purple feel more cohesive because the browns in the scene are agreeing with their coolness, I guess I could say. Up here, there's a lot less cohesion. It's just a bunch of crazy colors. So that's my general thought on hot and cold. It is funny that you're all staring at this absolutely unhinged Blastoise while I do this work, but such is this video. So, third, the blue works the same way as the orange, but in reverse. If you nudge blue this way, it becomes cyan, it becomes green. It's not warm. Nudge it this way, it becomes purple. Purple's got a little red in it, but it still doesn't really feel warm. It's still a cool color when you dip into indigo like that. But if the color scheme of your picture is, say, purple and orange, those are your focal points, and the blue just happens to be there. If there's water and the water is going to be blue, the water could be a different color, but if it's going to be blue, you nudge that saturation down, ooh, suddenly it feels warmer. It feels less, there's less coolness in that. That's just the general fundamental of color there is temperature. And it could be a little elusive if you don't understand it, but once you start doing this a couple times, it's going to come super easy to you. Now let's actually fix a little issue here that I see. Unlock this layer. Ah, that's so much better. There's lots of parts of that in this drawing. I hope you don't notice them like I do. Okay, so next I want to do a couple more of these, so let's snap into the future. Ta-da! Okay, I'm back, and we have 4 passes of this Blastoise. And when it comes to sketching and doing iterations of a design, when you work at a company or in any kind of entertainment industry, you're probably going to need to do quite a few passes of anything for your team. So be prepared that you can't just draw something once and get it right the first time. That's usually not how it goes. But when you're working for yourself and you have an idea in your head of a color scheme or of a design or of a pose or something that you want, sometimes the first one's your favorite. And that's the case here. The first one is my favorite of these 4. Maybe because my heart wasn't in the other ones. But, you know, if you're working for yourself, there's nobody to stop you from just making your first idea the one you go with. But on the flip side, there are certain things about these other 3 designs that made me rethink things I didn't like about the first one. So even if you go with something that's super similar to the first sketch you did, if you did 30 sketches and those other 29 felt worthless, hopefully there was something in those other 29 that you learned that you can put toward this first one. So obviously I like this one the most. This is my favorite. But let me do a nice little... Ooh. Okay. But when it comes to this one, I like that this one compared to the first one. Let's actually, so I don't say this one and that one over and over. Let's say A, B, C, and D. So design A is a complementary palette. It is two contrasting colors on the opposite sides of the color wheel. A nice pink, teal, and with a hint of brown. Kind of gives it a third little color in there, but it's mainly a complementary color palette. Design B is a tertiary color scheme. The yellow, pink, and blue are kind of equidistant. The cyan, magenta, yellow set, what you call that, the triforce of cyan, magenta, and yellow kind of inspired this design here. So I wanted to bring in different types of color schemes that have colors that are mathematically different associated with each other in the color wheel. This one down here, D, so I still said this one anyway, design D is closer to an analogous color scheme. It doesn't really deviate outside of cool tones that much. It has a red nose, but the main colors in this design are just like purple, indigo, blue. That little zone on the color wheel is all this is hitting. And I don't think I used another color other than the red in the nose. There's a little bit of like a cool red in the eye, but even that can change, you know. And then C is just, it's just awful. It's just an awful cacophony of things. But I felt it deserved a pass because I wasn't fair to green in the other three designs. I didn't touch green at all. I used all the other colors and I didn't use green, so here we have our Lucky the Leprechaun C. I wanted to keep the nose red. It just definitely looks like it starts to look like a Gliscor if you're familiar with that Pokemon once you start changing its colors, because I made his ears super big. But this green and yellow color scheme reminds me of, it's a Koopa. It's almost a Koopa. But I just thought I'd give green a pass, and I hate it. But that's the value that it has to this design, is that I hate it. So it's totally fine. And I can get rid of the rest of these and say I like A, which is the one I left up here anyway. Is this on a correct layer? Yes, it is. I can delete it. Okay, so back to our original one. What I did like about design B was that the hair was brighter than the skin. So what can I do here to make that the case? Take the teal, make it slightly darker and more saturated. And this brown actually might look better as a beige. I'm not sure yet. Yeah, it helps. It definitely helps focus on the complementary color scheme if it's brighter and less in your face. Because not only is the saturation, like the intensity of the color, something you have to focus on, also the value of your palette. And I was going to talk about this at the end, but I think while we're coming up with a color scheme, I should probably just do it now. I'm going to make a layer above everything else and just fill it with black. And over in the blending modes, which most art programs are going to have something like a blending mode, I'm going to set this to saturation. And it's going to just show all the colors on my palette with a gray saturation, losing all of their intensity. And you can see from this that the hair and the skin, like the top layer of the skin, the scales of this turtle, or the scales, what would it be? That's skin, I guess. The skin is a similar value to the hair. So if I wanted the skin to be darker, and I can leave that layer there, it's not changing anything below it. I can take that layer, darken it a little bit if I want that to have the focus, and then you can flip that black layer off. Whew, that's really intense. It's too dark now though. And that's just personal, this is subjective, you can tweak this as much as you want. But with that layer on, maybe I want this shell color to be darker. I can keep doing that just to see. Oops. What's the shell color? This right here? Yep. This is me not naming my layers, but that's okay. Turn the black layer off, see how we did? See, now everything's feeling a little bit desaturated. Maybe this is just going to have the value difference in the hair and the cannons kind of sells it because the colors are so contrasting. Even if they have similar values, it's not really going to get confusing, in my opinion. If you have a different color scheme you like for this thing, that's totally fine. But this is how I'm deciding internally, and this is how you can decide on your own. The kinds of things that go through your head when you're looking at a design, and you're deciding how you want to do it. So I like the skin and hair how they are. I made the skin a little darker, hair a little lighter. I like the nose color. The eye color, now that the body is more of a beige. I actually do like the eye color brown. Maybe we warm it up just a little bit. It kind of fits in with the mouth a little bit more. And then we're going to shade the eye as well. The other eye is going to have a special little starburst effect in it, so I'm leaving a little sketch in there. The cannons are a little too desaturated. They're out of place, in my opinion. And also this color that borders the arms might now need to be darker. Yes, I like that. I don't like it on the shoes as much, so I'm going to break my rule real quick. And even though these are on the same layer, I'm going to bring in the beige in that layer for the shoes? Question mark? Maybe just the top? Ooh. I like it. We're leaving it. And that's my alarm going off. Okay. So now the cannons are going to get fixed to a different color. Perhaps slightly more saturated. And we are going to make sure they are the same hue as the shoes and the shell, which I like. But if they were brighter, they would contrast a little more. But do I want them to stand out? The focal point is the face. So I don't think I want the cannons to stand out too terribly much. We're going to leave it just like that and call that our base color scheme for the Blastoise. So now that we picked the colors, we are going to move on to talking about the difference between form shadow and cast shadow. This is our cast form section, if you will. Whew. So I'm going to make a layer above all my colors and under my line work. So let's grab a random color. I'm going to use a desaturated purple, and you'll see why in a moment. I'm going to make a layer underneath the line work, which I think we already did, but here it is. And I'm going to start shading, and this is just with a normal brush. You can use whatever brush you want. I'm just going to shade the underside of the face. And I'm going to set this layer to multiply. It's actually not very dark. So really quick, I'm going to use a darker purple and fill that layer in. Boop. Now that looks like a nice shadow, right? So, if you are shading something, you have a lot of different methods you can use. If you are using a hard outlined shadow, just like this, it is completely binary. There is a shadow or there is not. You can see where there is shadow and you can see where there isn't. So that is referred to a lot as either cuts or cell shading. A lot of people know it as one or the other or both. You know, it's like the difference between Legend of Zelda, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess. You know, one has lots of games have soft shadows, and I'm kind of just, I don't even like that shadow right there. Lots of games have soft shadows, but that game is one game in a sea of many that has really hard, clean-cut shadows on its characters. I did this, I can shade the underside. I'm actually not using the correct brush. I want to be using this brush. And for people who didn't know that use Photoshop, you can cycle through your brushes with the pointy bracket keys. Saves a lot of time, a lot. And so you can go into your brush menu and set up the brushes you like right at the top. So you can flip between them in order all the time. It's super helpful. And you probably have a way to do it in other programs too. So I'm just using its face as an example right now. I'm giving it a cell shaded cuts pass on the shadows, just to show you the difference. So now, this is some nice shadows on the face. Just a pretty basic pass. And you don't have to do just one pass of cell shading. You can do multiple. I will reduce the opacity there to 50% and duplicate that layer. And on that duplicated layer, I will add a more liberal pass of shading so that there's 2 levels of shadow. And some games, some comics, some animation already looks like this, and it looks pretty cool. And that's totally subjective and up to you of what you want to put in your work. I'll shade the underside of the eye on both eyes. Maybe not that one, because that one will probably glow, so I'll leave that one alone. There we go. And I'll shade under here. So, nope, one more. Underneath the hairline. So most of these shadows are form shadows, but there's a few that are not. Form shadows are shadows that are naturally created, I'll use the arm as an example, on the underside of a 3-dimensional structure. The light is naturally going to be hitting less there, because if the light source is above it, then it's going to catch less light from below. So that is a form shadow. A cast shadow is, say, the top of the arm should be getting shadow, or should be getting light, excuse me, but this cannon is in the way, maybe. So there's going to be a shadow cast by that cannon onto the arm. That is a cast shadow rather than a form shadow. A shadow made being casted from another object, as opposed to a natural shadow based on the form of an object. Cast form. You can remember it with this little guy. I don't know how to draw cast form's face. That is a Rotom pretending to be a cast form. We're going to erase that. So then here, the shadow on the underside of the cannon. And I'm probably going to redo this off camera, but maybe it looks nice. Maybe I'll just keep it. So when it comes to form shadows and cast shadows, I had to pause really quick because I had a problem with my recording, but we're back. The difference mainly between form and cast shadows is that when you have a form shadow on most 3-dimensional structures that have any kind of normal curvature, they're going to be a little bit blurry. That is the incorrect layer. I didn't want to draw that there. Let's put that on a new layer and set it to multiply. Okay. So they're going to be a bit blurry, or they're going to transition more naturally across a 3D surface. So they might even be even softer than that, depending on, what kind of structure you're... I'm just using the smudge tool right now, by the way. Depending on what kind of structure you have, it's going to look different. I'll erase the extra. So that's like just a perfectly decent soft shadow here, and I can even add a little bit more. And this is me using the smudge tool because I would say I'm being lazy, but if it works, it works. So why judge it? But then cast shadows. I know I'm drawing the same thing that I just drew previously, but it's because of the recording. Cast shadows, and you can test this yourself with the sun or a lamp or your computer screen even. The farther away your object that's eclipsing the light source from the object that it is casting the shadow onto, the farther away it is, the blurrier the shadow is going to be. And so you get that's a nice look to me right there, and I can use my eraser and just go and change the shape a little bit. But yes, I like that. I think that looks pretty nice if I have my light source above. And obviously you can grab this layer, change the color, do whatever you want to do to it. So when you're shading, pretty much all of your shading, most of your shading, I can't really think of a third type. There probably is. If I did a quick Google search, there probably is one. But when I'm drawing, the main things that I'm thinking about when I'm coloring is this a form shadow or is this a cast shadow? Right here, I'm just shading the underside of a structure, and you don't have to blur it. You can just do the cell shading, the hard cuts like I mentioned before, and just leave it binary like this. But I'm just doing a little blending right now because I'm having fun. And then sometimes it's a cast shadow, so under here, I'm not going to blur that. I'm going to leave it exactly as is. And so I'm going to go across the whole structure and color it just like this. but I'll leave the shading for now and come back so I can talk about cuts versus soft cuts versus hatching. And now that I say that, I'm actually going to save that for the very end, the actual mark making to differentiate different materials. I'm going to talk about that at the end. Actually, using the hair is a bad idea because I want to talk about the materials later. So I am going to delete that. And I'm going to show you on the skin instead, because we've already done the shadows on the skin earlier. But I'll do the highlights on the skin too. So now there isn't going to be a cast highlight. All of the light is coming from a light source. So there's not any kind of extra location that the light could be coming from. Or so you think, because there is bounce light. Or rim light. Rim light's kind of the same as a normal highlight, but just handled a little differently, and I can show you the difference between them. So this highlight right here on the ear, I can treat it just like a form shadow. I can leave it a cut just like that because it looks nice. Or I can blend it out a little bit just to give it a nice solid gradation from the top of the ear as it goes down toward the inner ear. Just make it look like a nice little light source there. And then maybe there's a shadow cast by the hair I can carve out with my eraser. That looks pretty cool. So you can go across anywhere you need to do that. And you don't have to blend the whole thing. You can just blend the underside if you want to. Because let's say this is the eyebrow, right? This is the brow ridge. There's going to be a harder, in my head, there's going to be a harder, what do you call that? Like a meeting between these two planes, the top of the eyebrow and then where the forehead starts. I don't really want it to be that blurry, but the actual brow is kind of like a big rounded bump, so I want it to be kind of soft on the bottom. And I'll go around and do that to different parts, the cheek, the arm, etc. But bounce light. Let's make a brand new layer. I'm going to set that to screen. Bounce light is going to be something like this. Light is hitting every surface all around you from the light source, obviously, but also from just the residual colored light bouncing off of objects around things. If you've ever seen, like, if you've ever been wearing like a bright red shirt and stood out by a window or in the sun and then held your arm up in front of your chest and your entire arm is just like glowing red, all of that sunlight that's hitting your shirt is then bouncing off and coloring the objects around it. So I think if I was going to do something like this, a bounce light on the arm, I would want it to be this magenta color. Maybe a little bit more red. Yep. Because if this shoe, and this Blastoise having shoes is hilarious, if this shoe is extremely shiny and is reflecting a lot of light from the sun, or is just in general coloring the things around it kind of purplish that catch that light, there would be like a purple, let me use the actual purple here, there would maybe be some residual purple light on, maybe not the knee because this is the upper side, but maybe like right here, and then perhaps on this, and on this. There might be a little purple light catching in all of those areas. So I would put a little bit of a purple bounce light if I was really going hard and trying to make some cohesion in the color. But you can see just from that, it helps the color scheme, like having this extra little light. And then on top of the bounce light, that usually is just to affect the color. Oops, that's the wrong layer. Don't worry about that. There's also a rim light. So let's say there's a light source, there's some fire behind this Blastoise. Something's on fire. It set something on fire. Why would it have done that? I don't know. It's a clown. But let's do this. Make a new layer. Excuse me. And perhaps I'm going to set that to normal. Perhaps behind it, something is on fire. So you're going to get this light around the edges that on the opposite side of this Blastoise is probably lighting its entire backside. But from your perspective, you're just catching the edges of where the light from the light source behind it somewhere. There's some kind of like little fire back behind it somewhere. It's a sun, but whatever. There's a little fire, and it's burning away back there, and it's lighting everything behind this Blastoise. You can do that everywhere. You can do... Well, this is a thing that photographers are really good at. Bounce light and rim light. Setting up... I think they call them fill lights. Photographers in the chat represent... when you're trying to fill different parts of the shadow to make something look more volumetric, you add more different colored lights and things to bounce that light around. It really makes the subject of your image look better, and we can do that in drawing as well by using rim lights and bounce lights and stuff like that. For now, I'm just going to focus on doing an entire pass of the shadows, and I will be right back with you. I'll probably I'll film it all and speed it up, but here we go. So here I spent a few minutes just working on the more difficult parts of the shading. Difficult not meaning that hard, but things that required a different type of treatment from the shading, things that I wanted to play with and differentiate from the other parts of the design. That mainly is the hair, the eye, and the cannons. And I think the cannons could go any kind of way. I didn't want them to be super shiny. I wanted them to be kind of dull. I might polish them up just a little bit and change them after posting this video. So the version that you see on my Etsy, where you can buy this as a sticker, or on my Blue Sky, is probably going to have the cannons slightly different. But for the purposes of this video, I was just displaying the change in material. So things are going to be shaded differently based on what they're made out of, obviously. And I wanted the hair to look a little bit more not quite fuzzy. I wanted it to look a little coarse and weird, so I tried a little bit of cool hatching with one of my flat brushes, that first brush from the lineup earlier. And the metal, the cannons, were going to have just slightly more weird variations in shadow and highlight than other parts of the body because they would be naturally more reflective. And that's definitely something, everyone has something to learn, and I know that for my next piece I'll probably reference some metal and some, even cannons or like steel tubes to practice shading those before I get started on that, because sometimes you work on a picture and while working on it you realize a little bit of a weakness of yours and it's something that you haven't shaded, some kind of material you haven't worked with, be it wool or latex or leather or something like that you've never shaded before. So I did my pass on the hair and I did my pass on the cannons and I got to the eye and I have a lot of fun with it and I add some sparkles. It's really simplistic, but I liked it. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. This is like a 50-minute video. I did not see it taking that long, but I really didn't want to speed up a lot of the teaching process. I wanted to put as much color theory into this video as I could. It doesn't really matter how long it is. I don't have a lot of subscribers. I'm not monetized, so who cares? I'm going to make the best video I can make and the type of video that I want to make because it will attract the people that like it. And even if somebody clicks off after 2 minutes or 30 seconds, some people will watch the whole thing. And I just want that person to get a crash course on color theory. And I think that's just going to be the title of the video. And I wanted an excuse to draw this Blastoise to finish out the set of Venusaur and Charizard, but also pack this video with as much information as I could. And as I continue on YouTube, I'm sure that I'll get better at balancing teaching and art, so that I'm not doing 50-60 minutes of art and talking for one small topic. I should have probably broken this video up into like how to pick a color scheme and then just done the color scheme part and then talked about the materials and the shading techniques in a different video, but I'll probably make another video with those techniques anyway. I'm here for the long haul. I'm not going anywhere, so I'm just going to keep making videos and probably not retreading the same ground, but I'll find different ways to talk about each thing, because you can mention something like color theory in 10 videos in a row and talk about completely different elements of shading and techniques, and then over the course of me trying to teach and show people color theory, I'll probably get better at it myself. So I'm sure that I'll internalize my own lessons as I'm saying them out loud and just naturally get better at it. So the same goes for you. Do your absolute best at what you're doing. If you watch my videos and think, oh, I wish I drew that good, you absolutely can. You can do anything with practice. I've looked at many other artists and thought, I wish I could draw like them. There are people right now doing splash arts for League and concept art for all sorts of crazy games that I play that I look at and think, yeah, I'll never be able to make art like that. And at a certain point, if you can get over anxiety, you can, or you naturally will gravitate toward the type of art you like. Some people might look at simplistic, graphic, cartoony work and say, how in the heck do they make that so simple? And they make it so simple, just drawing a human being as a cute little collection of shapes, while those same people are looking at the other art thinking, how do they paint such beautiful, realistic rendering? And, you will fall somewhere on the spectrum of art. You will figure out what you like, and you will get better. Like, don't think that you're just locked into drawing a certain way or shading a certain way or drawing faces a certain way. Anything you set your mind to, you can find reference and practice and build that visual vocabulary. And so years ago, I thought I'd be doing intense concept art paintings of landscapes. And it's like, no, man, I want to draw a Blastoise clown. Like, just own that stuff. You can do it. So, thanks for watching the video. It was a super long one, but I'm proud of it. And thank you for watching Design Twist. Check out my socials, like and subscribe if you want to do that. You can buy this Blastoise as a sticker, like I mentioned, on my Etsy. Check my website. I should have commission info up. I keep saying that, but forgetting to put the info up. So hopefully I do it after this video. Click over to my website in the description and check it out. Thank you so much. The link to the music I use is in the description. And thank you for watching Design Twist again. Peace.